The Sandbox video podcast is brought to you by smartShift, the global leader in intelligent automation for SAP transformations.
Hello, and welcome to the Sandbox video podcast. I'm your host, Joyce Kilhaywick. Today, I'm with Stephanie Nashawaty, Global VP and Global Head of Customer Advisory for SAP. SAP is the world's leading enterprise resource planning software vendor. In her role, Stephanie is responsible for setting the go-to-market strategy and scaling SAP's global and regional customer advisory experts. She and her team help companies leverage technology to shape their futures, solve their most sophisticated business challenges, and disrupt industries. Stephanie joined SAP in 2016 as Chief Strategist, where she led strategy and planning for key strategic accounts. Prior to SAP, Stephanie held executive leadership positions at Oracle, IBM, Parametric Technology, and Pegasystems. She is a graduate of the University of Vermont. She's also done master's work at Stanford. Stephanie, welcome. I also did my graduate studies at UVM. Where do we find you today?
So I am just south of Boston in Norwell, Massachusetts.
So we are also neighbors, and we're going to jump right in and talk about something that's on every leader's mind these days. That is building leadership trust during very turbulent times. Your experience gives you a unique perspective. You've helped many companies undergo major organizational transformations, and as an executive leader, you've driven change within your own organization. So the environment that leaders find themselves in today is really far from business as usual. Can you share more about that? What dynamics are currently affecting leaders as they work to drive change?
Well, Joyce, I think no matter what industry we are in, we can agree that we are living through truly extraordinary times where uncertainty is really the new norm. But it's really challenging moments like these that may teach us the most about leading effectively. A recent study indicates that CEOs' confidence in their own growth prospects has declined dramatically, with over 75% of them planning for flat or declining growth in their business. So as growth slows, the top of board agendas is transforming business models to try to create new revenue streams, or very often in parallel, a focus on reducing expenses, whether it's headcount, travel and entertainment expenses, or IT spending, or some combination of the above. Companies are being forced to make very, very tough decisions. In technology, an industry with recent explosive growth in hiring, this year they've been hit especially hard with almost 120,000 workers laid off from US tech companies in 2023. Multiple rounds of layoffs, which is very unusual, and it's only March. So going from managing rapid growth to figuring out how to slash expenses without damaging culture or performance, those are very, very different management challenge, and they require different leadership skills. Leaders must drive results in shifting organizational structures and teams around leadership vacancies, shifting priorities. Layoffs and reductions in forces test organizational cultures and leaders. For new leaders and smaller companies, it might be the first time, but these types of reductions will have lasting impacts on the cultures of organizations. What I see happening is that we're forced to balance short-term needs to cut while investing in other areas for long-term success of the organization. So in answer to your question, I would say the two main themes I'm seeing played out are how do leaders maintain and build trust in this high-stress environment, and how do leaders drive current short-term org performance as well as thinking longer-term and leading for the future. A thought leadership piece recently put out by PwC, I thought asked the question well. How do leaders balance winning today's race while simultaneously running tomorrow's?
Excellent question. And my question is, in your work with customers, you've seen this play out in both large and small companies. So in general, what are the differences? Do you tend to see more common pitfalls in one versus the other?
Well, look, we're in an environment with macroeconomic uncertainties, whether it's the war in Ukraine or the various weather events and the things we are seeing in the banking crisis. We've got 4 generations in the workforce for the first time ever, and we have the reality of remote workers. These complexities are not unique to small or large companies. We're all dealing with that. I think the answer is talent. Talent is extremely important these days, having experienced operators who can help manage through these crosswinds. But with resource scarcity and high stress, leadership and organizational behavior tend to break down. There are very few leaders today, Joyce, who are operating at their best. And that may be because they're worried for their own roles, or they're viewing all of this as a zero-sum game where they're in a battle for scarce headcount, scarce budget dollars. So leaders all the way up to CEOs are having to referee competing investment areas. So trust up, down, and across the organization is challenged. So how do you overcome that? Well, organizations need very clear strategy and focus. They need to truly understand what's our purpose, where are we going? What do we need to do to get there? I think that the companies with clear strategy and priorities will perform better regardless of size. And to preserve trust and minimize ambiguity, I believe that the workforce really needs to understand how decisions are being made today. I call it a consistent decision-making framework. You need a framework for decisioning that is pragmatic and data-driven. Leaders and employees need to have some consistency, so even when they don't get the resources or the budgets that they deem critical, or if they're asked to reduce their organizations, that they still trust in the fundamental fairness of the organization and that they understand the organizational priorities. I think transparency is even more important when you're forced to remake a decision as a leader, and I hate to say that, but that happens in this environment. We all set out with the best intention, situations change, and we have to remake a decision. I think it's important that we own that. Own it's a change. Own it's a change to what we've told the organization to do before. Be authentic and explain, why what we're doing is so important. I found that people will get on board even with difficult changes if they understand the how and the why of them. So I like to think about, information is truly the currency of trust in this environment.
Mm-hmm. I think you've said it very well. Consistency, clarity, transparency. It does sound like when businesses commit to a transformation, they are signing up for a bit of organizational volatility. Do I have that right?
Absolutely.
How can leaders best position themselves for success with their teams? Do you have any best practices?
Sure. So look, with digital transformation, that what we just talked about with focus and clear priorities definitely holds true. What surprises people sometimes, Joyce, is that very often the technology piece is the easiest and the most straightforward. It's truly the human element that has that variation. I've heard the expression used, human grenades. You have to watch out for human grenades in a project, because people get attached to processes and ways of doing things, even if they know they're inefficient. I think we can all relate to that, whether it's an Apple iPhone upgrade or your home Sonos system where you're told you have to do an upgrade. Many of us feel this brief moment of hesitancy because we know something's going to change. And even if the upgrade is better or the UI is better, we were familiar with how it worked before. So when you think about that, when you're thinking about a large ERP transformation, when done right, you aren't just, making the underlying business processes faster. You are actually fundamentally changing the underlying business processes to make the organization more agile. And people are human and very, very attached to processes they know, even if they're bad ones. So I think something everyone needs to consider, Joyce, is that people who are tasked with leading the change in organization are humans. And as humans, we all bring bias into our decision. There's a great expression in Europe that says the frogs won't vote to drain the swamp. In North America or in the US, we say turkeys don't vote for Thanksgiving. And it's a crass expression, but what it's really referring to is too often in an organization, the agents of change may view themselves as negatively impacted by the changes we're asking them to do. So a good example would be when you think about a finance transformation. If we're using, AI technology, that may result in us leading fewer human beings in accounting to do reconciliation of cash collections. That makes people nervous. They need to understand what their role would be in finance of the future. So when it comes to working with customers considering large tech investments, the stakes feel higher today, Joyce. These are career-making decisions, as well as deciding the technology platform to bring your organization into the future. And every company today is really a tech company. What I'm finding is that rare is it that there's the CIO or the CFO who will make these decisions unilaterally. Most of these decisions are being made in large cross-functional committees. And sometimes consensus can lead to mediocrity. True change, big change, sometimes needs big, bold, decisive action. So to the second part of your question, I can offer a few areas of advice and observation through the lens specifically of an SAP S4 transformation about what makes these projects successful. The first and foremost is governance. A governance plan is key, and it needs to involve the customer, SAP executives, the implementation partner, anyone in that ecosystem who really can put the customer success in their digital transformation into the center of everything that they do and align on what success looks like. I think it's very, very important in these projects that we have what I call value drips. Change is difficult, as we talked about before. End users need to feel things getting better. Folks funding these big projects need to see the value of the projects and be able to articulate tangible results. Critical that the business case and that value of the investments is widely understood across an organization. And the last piece I'll talk about is data. Data is a hot button. Most large SAP customers, likely many of your listeners here, are sitting on SAP systems with millions and millions of lines of custom code. Custom code means software code which didn't come from SAP, but which is designed for specific users or specific use cases, and it builds up in an organization over the years. Custom code increases the cost of operations and maintenance for IT applications. But maybe a more unfortunate outcome from custom code is the inability to easily implement software changes, to take advantage of innovation as it's being pushed out. So as you move on to a new S4 system, most CIOs I work with are trying to get back to standard, keep custom codes minimal. But in large, complex global organizations, various business users, various geographic locations will battle hard that they have custom, unique needs in their business and that standard won't work for them. So you need a real clear decision-making process for non-standard code. If not standard, why not? So today, in today's environment, especially, the role of the CIO is so critical because only they can look holistically across the various business users and speak to decisions for the best of the collective good of the organization and the project. There's a CIO I work with at a large A&D company who's always fond of saying that during a big transformation project, no one will get everything they want, but everyone should get everything they need. So behind many successful S4 digital transformation projects are true thought leaders who deeply understand the value and have the fortitude to lead their organizations forward. Leaders who leverage technology to prepare the organization for the race of the future.
I find myself struck by your empathy for people going through change, their fear around change, but also the need to have a strong, clear vision to put something forward. So let's bring this closer to home. Have you had the experience of handling turbulent situations within your own team? And would you tell us about that? Because people love personal anecdotes. I'm sure there are leaders in our audience who could learn from your personal experiences.
Certainly, Joyce. And after almost 25 years in the software industry, I've definitely managed through some of the ups and downs. In my view, a crisis can actually be an opportunity to build trust. When you think about crisis, it can bring teams together. It's not all that dissimilar to what we deal with here in New England, right? We hear a storm is coming and the whole town pulls together. And it reminds you how important those relationships are and how much you need those neighbors. I think a crisis in an organization can be viewed the same way. It's really an opportunity to build trust. My personal style as a leader is to lean in, to be somewhat vulnerable and transparent with how difficult the current environment is. I definitely don't ignore it. I acknowledge how disruptive it is. And I acknowledge that in many people's minds, they may be thinking, am I going to lose my job? Is my job secure? And when you're thinking about your own job, it has a way of peeling back a lot of the noise and the things that don't matter. And we can get back to the purpose of our work and what we're really tasked with doing. So I think my job as a leader is to set the emotional tone. So balance that empathy that you talked about with steadiness, but also a pragmatic focus on action and measurable results. As the leader of the team, it is my job to advocate for the resources that we need to be successful, while clearly outlining what my team is responsible for and how we contribute to the overall mission of SAP in both the short term as well as that future vision.
So let's wrap it up with what you see going forward. What do you see on the horizon? What are you most excited about over the next year for both you and your team?
Yeah, thank you, Joyce. So, look, I think that some teams and some organizations will really come together to weather this storm and come out stronger on the other side. And I think that's true for organizations as well. I think many companies will look to technology companies like ours to help them drive more efficient organization or to embrace those new business models. So, some of the most exciting innovations have come from challenging times. I think we all realize that. And at SAP, I get to partner with organizations as they work through that. And it's really, really invigorating. So I'm excited. While it's a challenging time, I'm also very excited about what things will look like on the other side.
Stephanie, it has been a real pleasure speaking with you today. You are clear, you are transparent, and you are authentic. Thank you so much for sharing what you know with our listeners who are out there trying to drive change and build trust within their own organizations. Thank you so much for all of your wisdom and for spending time with us today.
Thank you for having me, Joyce, and for all your contributions to New England over the years.
Thank you.
The Sandbox video podcast was brought to you by smartShift, the global leader in intelligent automation for SAP transformations.